With GT7 1.56, you have to start off reviewing the vehicles with the Mog. It's by far the standout of the three. Yeah, the Peugeot's good, the Beamer's fun, but this is the wackiest, the most oddball, one of the strangest vehicles in terms of just picking it randomly, it would seem, out of, well, any of the recent vehicles in memory, aside from maybe the Hymedic, but even both of those are very kind of old-school Gran Turismo. They're weird in the context of modern GT, but not really in the older games. Even as recently as GT6, you still had stuff like the Moon Rover in there, but of course these are just a little bit more useful than that, and it almost feels like the modern era equivalent of stuff like the Daimler motor carriage, the Ford Model T. Of course I'd personally love to see those back, but with that probably not going to happen anytime soon, I will definitely take stuff like this when we can get it. Now this is of course an early model Unimog, a 1962 Type 411, and I briefly touched on, well I guess not so briefly, I talked about it at length in my review for 1.56, how much I love the car. There is one thing I did miss though. I literally realised this as I was uploading the video, and of course a few of you mentioned this in the comments, and it's so fun to see, again leaning into this kind of vibe which the car has, which is if you change it to the wide body, which I of course did briefly talk about but I hadn't fitted it yet, you can fit it not only with a different variation of the kind of camper van section on the rear. You can see for example here in the video it's got that camper section, but it kind of slopes underneath on the back instead of the standard version being a big box. That only happens if you fit the wide body. The more notable thing is with that same wide body you can of course put a couple of hay bales on the back which are strapped down, which looks awesome, leaning into the farmhand kind of vibe, which of course the vehicle more often than not has. And one of the beauties of the Unimog in real life, or the Unimog as I've heard it's technically called, is how versatile it is. It's basically whatever you need it to be, and occasionally here in the UK you'll see them as well, and even though its looks have changed over the years, the essential concept has pretty much stayed the same, kind of like a Land Rover Defender was for many years, or various other vehicles in that kind of sector. In terms of its standard spec, well, it's nothing to write home about, that's for sure, or actually I guess it kind of is because it's so underwhelmingly slow. 29 horsepower, 32 points, which is one of the lowest in the game, at least off the top of my head. I'm not sure if there's anything lower than that, but maybe like a Fiat 500 perhaps. In terms of price, it's pretty cheap actually, 46 grand, which I mean you wouldn't really want to be paying crazy money for something like this, historic or not, so I'm pretty happy with that price. It is the cheapest of the three, and in terms of weight it's 1940 kilos, which for reference is actually less than something like Mercedes SL55 or Maserati Quattroporte. That's actually not that bad for a massive vehicle like this. There is one pet peeve though, which I have with the Unimog, and that is the tyres. In particular here, when you take it on rally or snow events, I really hate that they change the design from the big chunky old school tyres, which let's be honest are already more than capable off-road, that's kind of the point, and then puts on these almost slick looking tyres for dirt. I hate that. It's a personal peeve of mine, but that's by the by. In terms of performance, if you're going to use it on the track, it is wildly different. The reason why I say it's so different is because you have such a small amount of power, comparably speaking. Even fully built 230 horsepower or just under really isn't a huge amount for a vehicle which is still over 1300 kilos, as good as that is with all of the weight dropped, and more so its immense size and height, etc. It's quick, but it's quick in a very relative sense. Again, in that 1.56 review you saw me flying around the track, overtaking them of course like it was nothing, and it could definitely take on cars which are a higher point level, I would say, in terms of how it feels. On the dirt though, it changes dramatically, and in particular you really want to make sure that you've got some close ratio gears on this thing, and definitely use the manual box. When you're on the tarmac you're fine, regardless of the tyres, it takes corners well, it's quick enough to feel good, you don't really have to work the gearbox overly, it's just a good car. Off-road though, you really have to work that gearbox because of the fact that the mid-range or low-range turbos are the only options you've got. The high range would be interesting, but it might even be worse with the high range because it's such a naturally low revving engine, unsurprisingly, more so about torque than horsepower, that sometimes it feels like you're barely in the correct power band for more than like a second or two before it's suddenly losing power, you change up a gear too quick or whatever. So if you can keep it in that very narrow band of really good turbo spool, in a funny kind of way, you have to kind of drive this similarly to my own Centaur, the diesel Rolls build that I did on the channel. That of course has a limited range for the same reason. It's a work vehicle underneath, so it doesn't need to be fast, and because it's not designed to be thrown around a track or thrown around a dirt track, it's just not built for that. With a motor swap, of course, and I'm really keen to see what the Unimog could have in terms of a motor swap in future. I would personally love to see something like a Le Mans derived V12 diesel, because of course why not, but in all likelihood I reckon we'll probably get, if anything, maybe like a LS7 BRZ engine, something kind of underwhelming like that. Good power, but kind of expected neglected and a bit, you know, we'll have to see though, I guess. Overall though, my thoughts are pretty easy for this one. It's huge fun. You have to be very careful off-road though, because like I said, that power band passes you by very quickly, and when you're already working at a deficit in most, if not all, of the official rally events in the game, well, you really need to be on it when you're driving the car. It's a huge amount of fun though, and stuff like the hay bales and the camper back end, it just all adds to the charm. I love the fact that they added the car to the game. It definitely has that old school vibe, like I said, and yeah, I wouldn't be at all disappointed or even annoyed if they added more weird vehicles like this. Of course, up next we're talking about the Peugeot though. That'll be tomorrow for the 205 GTI, a vehicle which, funnily enough, in the completely opposite way, is actually fantastic off-road. This one though just feels a little bit underpowered, and I really do think the key to that in future will be a motor swap. It really will mean the difference. It will be night and day, I guarantee. We'll have to wait and see if that pans out though. I'll see you then, and thanks for watching.